Hi there. Welcome to Going Deeper with Steve Arterburn. I want to go deeper with you today. Now, are you going deeper? I mean, here's a way to go deeper. Honey, I got really upset yesterday when you took control of what I was doing. I felt like a little boy. Now, I want to just spend some time, slow down, and try to figure out what was it that impacted me so much when you were actually trying to help. I know that. I saw it as control. I felt like a little boy. Could we just sit down and talk this through? And so you sit down. You say, I'm trying to think. Was there ever a time in my life when somebody tried to control me and it just felt horrible? Oh, that's right. I remember now, when I was a little boy, my father would take control of me, pick me up, shake me, then beat me, and send me to my room and be a guard outside my room to be sure I didn't sneak out. And when you did that, trying to help me, but it felt like control, I think it took me back to that time with him. How about that? Now, I just made that up. So, but maybe if you took a reaction and said to your spouse, I'd really, really like to go deeper and find out the source, you might get to something. You know what really happened to me? I found out that an accident that occurred when I was in my 20s, and the people literally were decapitated. It's the worst thing I've ever seen. And I left and went down the mountain to the guardhouse and told the person there that there'd been a horrible accident. There weren't cell phones during that time. But man, I think I should have stayed there. Well, as I was talking to my wife about it, just to go deeper into that, and she's really good at it, reminded me of a time when I, saw the wreck. So I of the woman being killed on the curb, thrown out of the ambulance. I connected that with the thing up on the hill, and I connected that with me being really uncomfortable when I see things that are painful. I tell you what that did. It gave me some relief and a little bit of grace for myself when I see it connected to something else. So maybe today, going deeper is trying to take something that you've said and asking spouse, friend, someone, could we look into that? But I want you to stay with me because this is going to be a great lesson in the 12 steps for recovering from divorce. So today we're on the 9th step. Boy, is this a big step. We have become willing and ready for God to help us. And we've even become so willing and ready, we've asked Him to do it. And then, after we ask Him to do it, we need to get busy and go deeper and make a list of the people we've hurt. We might have said we did some things, but now we're being specific who we did them to. And now that we've made that list and we've worked through all of the resistance, we're willing to make amends. So what does this have to do with divorce recovery? Well, if you're experiencing the pain and the suffering and the struggle of divorce, well, you need everything going for you that you possibly can. Because it is such a drain, such a burden. We need to move beyond the burden. And so we get rid of the burden by making restitution and making things right. Someone may have hurt you deeply in the divorce process, but that doesn't make you innocent of all things. You may have spent your time, as I did, trying to prove you were the good person and the other person wasn't the good person. What a waste of time. Doesn't really matter, does it? Because one of the great realizations I had is that God was on her side too. Even though she had betrayed me and she had filed for divorce, still, God was for her, wanted the best for her. What a realization that was. So in this ninth step, it says, we made direct amends to such people whenever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. So this is simply about making it right. Now, I think a lot of people kind of get off the hook or let themselves off the hook on this little clause, except when to do so would injure them or others. And I know somebody hurt me deeply and arrogantly decided, I will not tell him because I don't think he can handle it. I mean, it's pretty serious. And I'm so glad that I found out and that that wasn't the end of it. But don't be like that. Don't use this clause as an excuse to not open up and tell the other person what had happened. We made direct amends to such people whenever it's possible. Now, is this important to God? How about we just ask God for forgiveness and we're good? Well, you know, a couple of scary things with that. One is that if we don't, the Bible says if we don't forgive others, then we don't get forgiven ourselves. So why is that? I mean, that you're supposed to just accept Christ. Well, maybe that's an indication you haven't accepted Christ's payment for sins that you have committed, so you could be free. So here we make direct amends. Now here's how important it is to God. Look at this verse, Matthew 5:23 and 24. If you are presenting, this is from Jesus, if you're presenting a sacrifice at the altar. Now, how many people do you know that are faithful enough in their worship of God that they're at the altar making a sacrifice? I would say that's a pretty committed person. This is not just some guy that's out there acting like there is no God. I think that's pretty great thing. So, how do you look at a person like this and tell them to stop what they're doing? Jesus is saying, you know, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, everything you have. Love your neighbor as yourself. And he said that those are 1 and 2, but 2 is equal to 1. That's how you do it. He's essentially saying your worship of me, big important thing, is worthless if you haven't taken care of that second clause in that, and love your neighbor as yourself. So if you're presenting a sacrifice at the altar and someone has something against you, leave your sacrifice at the altar. Let it go. Isn't that amazing? Just leave it there. Stop worshiping me or acting like you're worshiping me because you may be just doing that to look good because you've got some unresolved business to do. And it says, go and be reconciled to that person. Wow. As much as it's up to us, we need to do the right thing. Be reconciled to that person. Then come and pay and offer your sacrifice to God. That's pretty amazing. Now, I've told the story many times about stealing money and in college at a clothing store, making restitution. Stole about $1,000, paid back $6,000 when I figured out the interest. And then the guy said I was about to give up on humanity. I've told that story many times. But that's what I needed to do to be reconciled. You know, it's making atonement. It's at one-ment. It's making it right, paying what I owe. And I think if I had not done that, I would still be struggling and still not be free. But look, I stole that money. It's easy for me to know. I'm 100% guilty. I need to make it right. Here's the dilemma. when you are 30% wrong and the other person is 70% wrong. Bummer. Because they're not coming to you to ask for your forgiveness, but to make it right. You need to confess your 30%. Not confess something you didn't do. Don't have to go beyond that. But if we're going to make it right, we either make it right or we're going to live with some inner self hatred, the burden of unresolved things. We're going to, if we don't replace, like if we betrayed somebody, if we don't replace that by growing in Scripture, ask their in character, ask their forgiveness, tell them you're really working on character, trying to become a man of God, into God's Word, getting help. If we don't do that, then it's never going to be right. We're never going to feel good about our relationship with God. We make amends, we make it right, and we start to work right now. There was a little man, and his name was Zacchaeus. And Zacchaeus, I think he knew something was messed up. And I think he knew that Jesus had the answer. And so he sought out Jesus, couldn't see him for the crowd, climbs up in a tree, and Jesus had plans for Zacchaeus. The most unlikely person there, Jesus has a meal with him in his house. And before it's over, Zacchaeus becomes a giant of the faith. So often we focus on his stature or lack thereof, and we remember that little ditty, that little song, and we keep him in our minds as the wee little man, that he was a giant. Because by the time Jesus had that impact on his life, the evidence was this little cheat became a giant of the faith and said, everything I have, splitting it down the middle, half of it I'm going to give to the poor. And if I have taken anything from any person, I'm going to pay it back 4 times what I owed or what I took. Pretty amazing. That's a result of a changed heart wanting to make things right. We had a person that worked in our home, and she embezzled some money from us. And we found out, about it, and she was investing our money in her brother's meat company. So all these checks, when we finally looked at it, were to a relative to start a meat company. Now, sadly, she had asked us to invest in that meat company, and we had said no. Well, she couldn't pay that money back once she had stolen it. But she agreed to do what everybody could do if they need to pay back money but they can't afford it. You do the best you can. You tell the person, I can't pay it all back, but I'd like you to give me a payment plan, and in that payment plan, I'm going to do my best to make full restitution over time. It's the best you can do. If it's the right thing to do, you do it. I acquired an organization that had $1 million debt to an organization. And I felt like if I took over the assets, I also should take on the debt. And I should pay that group back. I so easily could have let it go. But I want to tell you something. That organization has stood behind me forever. They're one of the greatest advocates of what we do at New Life. The benefits of restoration of freedom. You do this, you make it right, then you go back and worship God, and He receives you because you've made it right. I don't know what you have. I don't know what you've done, but I know this. You can have freedom no matter what you've done. Make it right. I'll see you next time. Right here. I'm going deeper. And when we go deeper, we want to be sure we're going deeper into the right things. Relationship with God relationship with others. See you next time.